Hello and very welcome to my channel. I'm really happy to have you here, and I think it's about time that I told you something about myself. So I've been speaking about books quite a bit, but I haven't actually shown too much of myself or my other interests so far. So I figured this time is as good as any to do that. So hi, I'm Connie and I'm the woman behind this channel. And based on my content so far, you might wonder about the channel name, Wildlife Girl Stories. So I figured today we might as well just go through the three parts of this name and I will explain them to you, because so far you've heard a lot about the book side of things and my journal, of course, but not as much about the other parts. So let's change that. The first part that I want to start with is wildlife, because that's my background and that is still what makes up a big part of what motivates me in life. So that is actually part of what first got me onto the internet and writing my blog about animals and nature conservation. Because back when I was studying, I chose biology as my subject and then animal behavior for my master's degree. And I have always been interested in animals. I started out with horses and dogs, and then basically I moved on to study bigger animals, especially social mammals such as elephants and African wild dogs. That is also what brought me to England, because I was doing my master's degree in Manchester. And that helped a lot with my language, because even though I enjoy speaking and reading and doing things in English quite a lot, I'm actually German. Anyways, when I was studying these amazing animals in Africa, that was one of the best times of my life. And I would have liked to continue on and work in research in that area. Unfortunately, with Brexit happening and things being very, very uncertain in Europe at the time, I had to switch back to Germany and then had to find something else to do, because I just couldn't get back into the field with no connections left, because all of those were in the UK. Anyway, let me not dwell on the past too much right now. So even now, I still volunteer with nature conservation, because that is, as I said, a thing that interests me a lot, and I really want to help nature survive, even though humanity is doing a lot against it. This means that nowadays I work mostly with local animals, and my focus around here is bats, which have always interested me, but I only got really into working with them a few years ago, as that was one of the options to actually do some hand-on nature conservation in my area. So as you can probably tell, I love animals and I love nature, and I really want to do more to help them, and I also want to talk more about them. So I will definitely be reading quite a few more books on the topic of animals, nature, and wildlife. And I will also start a new series quite soon and create a form of animal journal where I talk about all the interesting animals and my stories with them that I have worked with and monitored or seen in the past. But yeah, that is all about my wildlife corner. So let us move on to the more girly part. I do have to say as a disclaimer that in my day-to-day life, I am not a very girly person. I work in software engineering, and a lot of the things that I do in my free time are also things that I share with more men than women. But there are some parts to me that do fit quite well with being a girl. The first one is probably the least so, but I've always enjoyed music, and I still really enjoy listening to soundtracks of movies or video games, especially if they have strings in them. And I did play the violin and viola quite a bit. I still play the viola sometimes, but not as regularly as I should probably. And I have started dancing a bit more than a year ago with my partner, and that is something that I really enjoy as well. So music is definitely a part of my life that I like. I also have a quite creative side, which you can probably tell from all the journaling that I do on this channel and that I'm doing right now. And I really like to paint by numbers, but not to paint by myself because I'm too perfectionist to really enjoy that most of the time. Or sometimes I also draw a little. And of course, I love to do all the designs for my different journals, such as this one or my reading journal that you can see a lot of on my channel. And then I do something that quite a lot of people that like reading also enjoy as well, and that is doing needlework. I mostly do crochet and also quite a bit of cross-stitching for pictures and for tablecloths. And I also try out different types of needlework every now and again. But as you can probably tell already, with so many hobbies that I have, all of those things are not things that I do very regularly, but it's more like I have a project that I work on in one of these areas, and then I make some progress in it while I'm in the mood to do so, and at some point I'll just put it down and work on something else again. And that works out fine for me. My job is already really stressful and requires a lot of attention. So in my free time, I tend to enjoy just doing what I feel like and not having too many plans to adhere to. But anyway, as one last part of the whole creative side, as you can see in my logo in the middle, I have actually created it myself. And I've put down a lot of the animals that I've worked with in the past and that I enjoy a lot. So that is also one of my creative projects that I really wanted to do for my blog, which we will get to in just a minute. So let's move on to the part that you're probably most interested in, to the stories. I have been reading for as long as I can remember. My family is into books quite a lot, and both my parents like reading and always have liked reading as far as I can remember. Of course, I started out reading German books, but I quickly started being interested in reading originals as well. So the first time that I read an English book was actually when I was 15. And I really haven't stopped ever since. Of course, I got a lot better at reading English books once I went to university in the UK and once I started doing all the practical experiences all over the world where I was speaking English a lot. But even after being back home for years, I still really enjoy reading originals. Anyways, when I first started out reading, one of the authors that I read the most of is Karl May, which is a German classic that wrote a lot of cowboy and Indian stories, and they were full of adventure and I really, really enjoyed them. I still read quite a few of his books every now and again because he wrote 80, I believe, and I haven't quite gotten through all of them, so you will certainly get around to one of his books on this channel at some point. And then one of the other authors that I really started to enjoy and that got me more into speculative fiction is Michael Crichton. And my favorite book by him is probably Timeline, because I really enjoyed the idea of going back to medieval times and having to survive there. And that was a book that I basically ate up once I found it on my father's bookshelf. So back then I was mostly reading historical fiction because I was quite interested in that, but soon enough I discovered fantasy and sci-fi as well, and now I read quite broadly and basically whatever sounds good. Some of my all-time favorites that I do want to share with you though are the trilogies by Trudy Kennevan, which I have reread quite a few times because I enjoy them so much, as well as one of my first science fiction books that got me into that genre, which is Honor Among Thieves, which is also the first book in a trilogy by Rachel Kane and Anne Aguirre. And that is just a really great YA story that I do need to reread again at some point, to be sure. But this will be enough about books for today, because now we can move on to something else that also fits into the category of stories. Because stories, of course, cannot only be read, they can also be written. And I always wanted to tell stories, even when I was little, so I actually started writing even while I was still in school and finished my first manuscript back then. I didn't ever get any of that published, but I have been into writing since then, and I tend to pick up and write something every now and again just because I still enjoy it. Lately, I've been getting back into writing more regularly as I created my blog, which is German and on animal and conservation topics. And I have also been writing a few short stories, and I really want to go back into writing more often and more consistently. So maybe I'll tell you something more about this in the future as well. And finally, because there's one more really cool way to tell stories, I started playing RPGs, I think almost 10 years ago now. And I have been part of a few smaller D&D campaigns and some more Numenera stuff that I was leading as the game master. And that was also something that I really enjoy. But I will say that it is quite a lot of prep work to be done. So I'm not quite sure how much I will be playing in the coming years. But I do like to play in shorter campaigns every now and again. So yeah, I have been talking about myself for quite a while now. I hope that this was interesting for you, and I hope that you found something maybe more than books that sounds interesting for you to follow along with. If so, please let me know in the comments which part you find most interesting, and also leave me any questions that you might have on any of the topics that I was talking about. And as I said, I will be coming back with more about animals. And of course, as you already know, if you've been watching my channel, I will be talking about books and stories for sure. So if these topics sound interesting to you, please think about subscribing and maybe coming back to watch my future videos as well. And I hope that this was as much fun for you to look at and listen to as it was fun to make. So have a great day, thank you for watching, and go read something nice.